Sharon Ekambaram is head of the Refugee and Migrant Rights Program at Lawyers for Human Rights, and she joins us now. Sharon, thanks for joining us again. I worry that as journalists, we're not being responsible in the way we cover these kinds of situations. Are we fueling the fire here? And by sort of repeating what locals are telling us, that foreign nationals are drug dealers, that they're rapists and murderers, and that they're stealing everybody's jobs, we're actually just perpetuating the stigma.
Thank you for that opening comment. I think it is, to be honest, I think there's been a significant shift in the way that media and journalists are reporting on the scourge on our society called xenophobia. SAMP, the Southern African Migration Project in the early 90s, did do an incredible report at that stage, talking about how the media and journalists tend to criminalize migration by the way in which they report on crimes, mentioning specific nationalities, like all the Nigerians are drug dealers. And I think we're seeing a shift. There is a consciousness, but there is room for improvement. And I agree that how we cover these incidences, it's important that we locate it in fact, and that we are able to challenge and debunk some of the myths that are deliberately spread when opportunists like Action SA, Operation Dudula are deliberately scapegoating migrants for very serious problems that we are facing in our country today.
How much of the allegations against migrants, in fact, you could actually correct me in the correct terminology, if you wouldn't mind. Is it migrants? Is it foreign nationals? What is the least offensive word for people who are living here that weren't born here?
I mean, I suppose they're migrants. That's a universal word that is used. You have distinctions with refugees who flee persecution, and according to our policy, according to international obligation, our country recognizes their plight and grants protection to refugees and asylum seekers. And then you have a broader category of migrants. And I think, again, the journalists at South Africa needs to be understanding what is the impact of climate crisis. Are we seeing an increase in the movement of people forcibly displaced because of the climate crisis, particularly in sub-Saharan Africa? And in that way, we can ensure that our response is proportionate to the problems that we're facing, as opposed to blaming the very people that have no choice but to leave their homes, their families, in order to survive for their very livelihood.
Sharon, let's switch it around and talk to people in Alexandra and so many other areas, impoverished areas especially, and they'll say to you, people who have come from other countries who don't have the right documents are taking our jobs, and it's not fair because we should get those jobs first. What do you say to them?
Look, it's a very complex question. There's no easy answer. I think from working at Lawyers for Human Rights and being an activist and part of movements like the Treatment Action Campaign and other organizations, our first call is to build solidarity in communities like Alexandra to deal with the scourge of poverty, to deal with inequality. Working at LHR, we can see that there is a systemic crisis in the asylum system in our country. And there are serious problems that need to be addressed, and no one wants to be undocumented. It goes to the core of a front against your dignity as a human being when you don't have a document. And I think that that's a long journey that many people struggle to get the proper papers to be able to live in our country. And our policies state clearly, we have a policy on immigration, we have a policy on labor, and that the law must actually take its course. We can't take the law into our own hands, as is being done today by actually people like Operation Dudula, they represent the greatest threat to our democracy. South Africa needs to understand this, that this crisis is not going to be resolved by chasing away arbitrarily about 2 million people who are Black African foreign nationals in our country. That's not going to solve the problem of systemic unemployment. Of over 70% of our young people are unemployed. People that have a degree, people that have come out of university. That's the problem we need to be solving by engaging with our government, by holding our government to account. That's where the solution to our problems are. They lie with our government and the ruling party, and not by fighting the poor against the poor. That's not going to solve our problem.
Thank you so much, Sharon Kambaram of the Refugee and Migrant Rights Program at Lawyers for Human Rights. Just a comment from me. I don't think government is doing enough to speak out against why we should be protecting refugees and asylum seekers, because it's not going to be popular amongst voters.